France is in its third day of mourning following Friday's terrorist attacks that killed 129 people. We'll have a special report on poaching and the growing use of a deadly chemical to kill the animals. And could Kenya's doping scandal dash Olympic dreams? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. French authorities have detained 23 people in police raids across the country in the aftermath of Friday's terrorist attacks in Paris. Officials are also investigating reports that the mastermind is a Belgian national living in Syria. Meanwhile, masked Belgian police are searching a Brussels neighborhood for suspects believed to be involved in the massacre. We get more in this report from Reuters' Gavino Gary.
The hunt for suspects in Friday's attacks in Paris has focused not only on targets in France, but Belgium as well. Police in Brussels have converged on the Molenbeek district where two of the attackers had lived. Several arrests have been made, although 5 of 7 suspects taken into custody over the weekend have been released. Attention is also turning to the man who may have masterminded the attacks. A source close to the French investigation has told Reuters that Abdelhamid Abaoud, a Belgian currently in Syria, could be behind the carnage in Paris. A man with the same name was featured in Islamic State's so-called online magazine called Dabiq last February. Authorities in Paris say one thing is certain: the search for those behind the deadliest attack in France since World War II has only just begun.
Well, France is in its third and final National Day of Mourning on Monday. The nation observed a midday moment of silence to pay homage to the victims of the Paris attacks. The European Union had asked all its member states to participate in the silent observation. Speaking from Brussels Monday, EU Foreign Affairs Chief Federica Mogherini called for a united response to the extremists who carried out the attacks.
Daesh is a threat to all of us, let me say that coming together today, as we were coming together on Friday, joining forces and acknowledging that this is not an attack on one single country. It's not only an attack on Europe, it's an attack on civilization, I would say. Requires us to unite forces, share information, share a political agenda, put together all our diplomatic, economic, sometimes also military efforts to face this threat. There is a security component to this. There is mainly a diplomatic and a political component of the work we are doing, and I believe this is going to be the field where we're going to defeat Daesh for real.
French fighter jets launched massive airstrikes Sunday evening against the Islamic State stronghold of Raqqa, destroying a command post and a training camp. The planes took off from Jordan and the United Arab Emirates and were operating in conjunction with the U.S. forces. Back in France, speaking on a French radio program, French Prime Minister Manuel Valls says in spite of their best efforts, more terror attacks are likely.
Oui, on s'est attaqué à la France parce que c'est un peuple.
Yes, France came and attacked because their people are proud, free, and are people who speak to the world through its universal values. But the truth, our own headedness forces us to say, and we say it. Have been saying it for months. We are at war against terrorism, and terrorism can strike and has done so. Even if we manage to fall several terror attacks, but can and we strike again? These coming days, in the weeks to come, I'm not saying this to scare people, but so that everybody is aware.
That message, no doubt, brought little comfort to the Paris residents trying to return to their normal lives.
I have the feeling that we all pretending. Like I spent all day outside yesterday, from 9 till 5 or something. I was out, like just wandering around, meeting friends. But we all pretending. We're all really scared. We're all really scared. But we need to. We're scared, but we know we have to fight back, and the only way to fight back is to keep on living the way we live.
The Islamic State extremist group claimed responsibility for the series of attacks in Paris that killed more than 130 people Friday night. French President François Hollande has called Friday's gun and suicide attacks an act of war. Well, the terrorist attacks in Paris are dominating the G20 summit of leaders. U.S. President Barack Obama is at the summit in the Turkish Mediterranean resort of Antalya, and a short time ago he spoke about the Paris attacks.
Of course, much of our attention is focused on the heinous attacks that took place in Paris. Across the world, in the United States, American flags are at half-staff in solidarity with our French allies. We're working closely with our French partners as they pursue their investigations and track down suspects. France is already a strong counterterrorism partner, and today we're announcing a new agreement. We're streamlining the process by which we share intelligence and operational military information with France.
Well, President Barack Obama has also pledged to redouble efforts to end the crisis in Syria and help France catch the perpetrators of Friday's carnage. VOA Europe correspondent Luis Ramirez tells us more.
Leaders came to talk about trade, energy, and climate change, but it was the terrorist attacks in Paris and the need to do something about the conflict in Syria that topped the agenda.
We will redouble our efforts.
The U.S. leader said the United States stands in solidarity with the French and will help hunt down the perpetrators of the attacks in Paris and work to resolve the Syrian crisis.
As was true with the terrible attacks that took place in Ankara, the killing of innocent people based on a twisted ideology is an attack not just on France, not just on Turkey, but it's an attack on the civilized world.
At the summit's first working session, a moment of silence was observed for all victims of terrorism. The attacks in Paris are causing leaders to put their differences aside and push forward toward their common goal, fighting the Islamic State group. President Obama had an unannounced meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines. They talked about resolving the conflict in Syria and agreed that in the wake of the attacks in Paris, the need is more urgent than ever. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Antalya, Turkey.
Well, the U.S. says that President Barack Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed Sunday on the need for a Syrian-led political transition, UN-mediated negotiations, and a ceasefire to end the 4-year civil war in the Middle East nation. The two leaders met for 35 minutes on the sidelines of the G20 Economic Summit, with the White House calling it a constructive discussion, a change from the two leaders' often antagonistic talks at other world meetings. Putin Foreign Affairs advisor says the Russian leader had a quiet, detailed conversation with President Obama. A White House official says Obama and Putin noted the diplomatic progress achieved in recent weeks in talks in Vienna. Well, as the world reels from the barbarity of the terrorist attacks in Paris, and Islamic State claims Friday's brutality is only the beginning of its campaign of terror, security has been boosted in countries that could become the next target. VOA's Laditsa Hoke reports that the United States has beefed up security at major public venues, including airports and sports arenas.
More officers, private detectives and canine patrols than ever were deployed Saturday night at UCLA's Rose Bowl Stadium as thousands of fans poured in to watch a football game. Tougher security procedures are now in force for sports events throughout the country. Airports, shopping malls, museums and other venues that attract large groups of people also are implementing more measures such as bag searches, body pat-downs and metal detectors. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said the city has deployed all the necessary personnel to ensure safety of public places.
I've been on the phone with Secretary Jay Johnson of Homeland Security and others, Chief Charlie Beck, and we're coordinating and fusing all intelligence. We just have to all be vigilant.
Garcetti said vigilance is crucial because it is hard to foresee every threat, as the Paris experience shows. The largest U.S. shopping mall located in Minnesota received an explicit threat in February and has toughened already strict security measures since then. There is a limit to how much you can do, says longtime New York City Police Commissioner Ray Kelly.
Soft targets are everywhere. But you do the best you can and you deploy your resources as effectively as you can.
Despite concerns, Americans by and large are confident their local security forces will keep them safe and plan to continue with their activities as usual. Nashville's ice hockey fans on Saturday crowded into Bridgestone Arena, which was recently outfitted with metal detectors.
I trust that our city is going to take care of us, and I feel that we're going to be safe.
One thing people in the United States and many around the world are learning is to adjust to a lifestyle with an increasing number of security measures. Zlatica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, the attacks in Paris have refocused Washington's attention on the Islamic State group and its ambition to strike within the United States. VOA's Michael Bowman tells us more.
Amid a global outpouring of grief and sympathy for France, a reminder from the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee that America is also a target.
We cannot allow ISIS to have this unmolested sanctuary in Syria and Iraq from which to plan and direct attacks against us, because some of those attacks will get through.
White House officials seek to reassure the American public.
There's not a specific credible threat to the homeland at this time, but we're going to be very vigilant.
Of particular concern, the Paris attacks demonstrated that terrorists can plan, coordinate, and execute bloody plots with little or no internet chatter or other communication that may tip off intelligence agencies. If Islamic State caught France by surprise, could it do the same to the United States?
The reality is, even the best intelligence will not stop a determined enemy that adapts to our defenses, and ISIS has adapted.
Reports that one of the Paris attackers may have been a Syrian asylum seeker will bring increased scrutiny of the Obama administration's pledge to accept 10,000 refugees from Syria. A Republican presidential contender disputes White House assurances that all those granted U.S. asylum will be subjected to thorough screening and vetting.
You can have 1,000 people come in, and 999 of them are just poor people fleeing, oppression and violence. But one of them is an ISIS fighter. If that's the case, you have a problem, and there's no way to vet that out. You can't pick up the phone and call Syria.
On the Democratic side, presidential candidate Hillary Clinton pointedly disagreed with Obama's assertion last week that the Islamic State group has been contained. White House officials say the president was referring to territory controlled by IS in Iraq and Syria, not the terrorist threat posed by the group. Michael Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vincent Makori. Coming up, the devastation caused by illicit poaching. Stay with us.
How do you see the world?
I see countries in turmoil.
I see our planet changing.
I see people at peace.
No matter how you see the world, you'll get an unbiased and uncensored view of it on Voice of America. On television, radio, online, and mobile. In more than 40 languages all day, every day. Millions of people tune us in.
How do I see the world? On Voice of America.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Welcome back. Now, you will recall that a couple of weeks ago, about 24 elephants in Zimbabwe lost their lives to poachers. That brought the number of elephant deaths in Zimbabwe to almost 70 in just 1 month. The use of cyanide has exposed the growing level of sophistication on part of the poachers and is a wake-up call that more needs to be done to protect our wildlife. Our Channels TV correspondent Cynthia Areh reports from Washington and would like to warn you that some of the visuals are disturbing.
It is often said that man's greatest enemy is man himself. What would make a person slay elephants like these ones just to get their parts? The answer is greed. And here is the result of that greed. In just 1 month, Zimbabwe has lost 62 of its precious elephants to cyanide poisoning. The use of the chemical hasn't sent shockwaves at all, as it's relatively easy to obtain in Zimbabwe.
Possibilities of trying to control this huge source of cyanide, which is creating so much revenue for the country, is going to be extremely difficult for us to do. So people have got access to this awful poison, and they don't understand the devastation that it causes by putting it into one water hole, and how far that devastation reaches.
Speaking of devastation, the Director, Program Design of the African Wildlife Foundation, Jamil Mandima, shed more light on more of the adverse consequences of illicit poaching.
The ramifications of this crime actually transcend other sectors, and we know that the men and women that have a passion for protecting these resources are risking their lives when they're out there patrolling, against very sophisticated poachers. And we also know that a lot of these terrorist insurgencies can never have legitimate sources of financing, so they use this as a way to actually get revenue and income that they translate into arms and into displacing people.
Jamil goes on to explain the reason behind the success of the illicit business and the level of sophistication.
The basic reason why this is getting worse is because there's a market for it, and it's paying very well. You look at the price of ivory, you look at the price of rhino horn, it's just insane to think that these worthless in terms of what they can do for what is claimed, people are still willing to pay that. And that is why we are really seeing that level of sophistication. And obviously taking advantage of the challenges, real ones, in the source countries where the ability to deploy resources that are adequate to protect is obviously constrained and limited. And criminals take advantage of situations, and that's what we are seeing now.
But what exactly is the way forward?
It's about addressing the matter holistically. And what we are already doing is really looking at how do we ensure we can stop the killing in the source countries where these wildlife resources are, which means ensuring equipping the rangers and scouts adequately with basic things like their uniforms, their camping materials, the firepower they require, the rations for them to go out, and then high-tech on how best to deploy efficiently. So that is critical, and then having backup aerial surveillance so that you can have very quick responses to emergencies.
Now this is what attracts poachers to elephants to begin with, their tusks. And unfortunately, if nothing is done to urgently address the issue of poaching, then generations to come will only be left with pictures of what once was, but no longer is.
Well, Cynthia Areh now joins me for more on the efforts to save African elephants. So, Cynthia, good job there. But talking to that gentleman there, did you get the sense that they fear the terrorist groups are actually ahead of the curve already?
I wouldn't say the word should be fear, but I will say that it boosted the concern, because right now it's if their plan was to address the matter maybe a month from now, then it's sped up the process to we need to do this maybe in a week's time.
Yes.
Jamil spoke about sensitization. Because some people, for instance, we saw what happened on Friday with Arnold Schwarzenegger, who owned a tusk. He owned it just, as a result that he liked it, but he didn't know what the elephants went through. And when he saw pictures or got a better understanding of what was done to get those tusks, then he blew up the tusk.
So that's why I think there's also a lot of push for an outreach like this to the recipient countries, like in Asia, where it's a big market, that people should understand what it really takes just to get one task.
In truth, he also spoke about the cost of the tusk, about 250 tons, which is what a pair and a male elephant weighs. That's the 250 pounds, but 1 pound goes for about $1,500. Now, if you do the math, just one elephant, you can see how much that costs. Yeah. I don't really think the problem in those destination countries like Asia and Thailand, I don't think what should be addressed there is awareness. Because I think, based on what I was told, that the awareness is there, but it's as regards those who are maybe the individuals. Yeah. But in terms of like the organizational level, I think they have a better understanding of what...
But there's also the other part, the collaboration with some corrupt people locally, because at the end of the day, there are greedy people in those countries, the source countries, and within government and also civilians. So there's also a challenge of eliminating that, fighting the corruption that enables the criminals coming.
In that case, Jamil spoke more about, you know, equipping the Rangers with more sophisticated weapons, because, I mean, when we looked at what happened some weeks back, we're talking about cyanide poisoning. That doesn't just come to you naturally. You have to spend some time really thinking about it. So it's about, that shows you the level of sophistication, showing what they're up against. So we're seeing that what we're pushing for is equipping the Rangers with more. Also, the use of sniffer dogs, so that even if they succeed in killing those elephants, at least to some extent, it can ruin the business of those who are paying for these, you know, these tons of ivory. The use of sniffer dogs and drones and all those.
It's really scary, especially that this is a multi-billion business, and so many people have an interest in this. Cynthia, thanks a lot for bringing this story to us. Well, Cynthia Areh is Channels TV correspondent based in Lagos, Nigeria. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Kenyan athletics rolled by a doping scandal. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Whether it's Hugh Jackman taking pictures with fans or George Clooney posing for snaps, in Hollywood, the selfie reigns supreme. According to a 2014 Pew Research Center poll, 55% of 18 to 33 years olds have taken a selfie and shared it online. Many of today's new celebrities are coming from YouTube, Vine and Instagram. Marketing teams are increasingly turning to social media to advertise new films and TV shows, as well as to sign the newest talent. Controlling celebrities' social media presence is also big business. Smartphones have made almost everyone a member of the paparazzi, and PR firms are often required to conduct damage limitations following online posts. Well, next up, dash cam drama. Now, police in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, say an officer suffered minor injuries when a woman driving a stolen vehicle struck both the officer and his patrol car with that vehicle. Police Chief Mike Carter says the woman was fleeing police in the stolen vehicle when she stopped and tried to turn around. Carter says the officer stopped and ordered the woman to stop when she then drove on the officer and struck both him and the patrol car. Carter says the officer opened fire and the vehicle went off the roadway. The woman was not hit by gunfire and was arrested after being shot with a stun gun. The woman faces charges that include assault and battery on a police officer. Not surprisingly, the video has gone viral. Well, and finally, the live-action movie version of Jem and the Holograms, which is based on the beloved animated series from the 1980s, has turned out to be one of the biggest box office bombs ever. Jem managed to pull in only a measly average of $545 million per screen, leading distributors to yank the film after 2 disastrous weeks in theaters. Jem managed to rank 4th among the worst opening weekend-wide releases since 1982. And that is what is trending today. 3:04. Well, it's time for a sports report on the latest news and notes. We turn now to Sonny Young with us, Sonny Side of Sports. Hello, Sonny.
Hello, Vincent, and sporty greetings once again to our Africa 54 viewers. Russia's recent suspension from World Athletics for doping violations has raised concern in Kenya that the East African distance running power could also face sanctions. In Kenya's lush Rift Valley region, which has produced some of the world's greatest distance runners, athletes and coaches say they're worried about possible penalties from the IAAF, the governing body for international athletics. In the last few years, more than 30 Kenyan runners have failed drug tests, including Rita Jeptu, winner of the Boston and Chicago marathons. At this year's World Championships in Beijing, Kenya topped the medals table for the first time, but that achievement was tarnished a bit when the IAAF said 2 Kenyan athletes failed doping tests. Kenya's small town of Iten is regarded as the country's long-distance running mecca, but athletes who train there are not happy about the cloud of suspicion hanging over them. Kenya's former world record holder in the marathon is Wilson Kipsang.
The Kenyan Federation and the Kenyan government are not strict enough, are not ready enough to intervene the doping issue. I think if IAAF and will really take an action, if IOC will take an action and maybe ban Kenya, I think it will be so unfortunate to Kenya and to athletes.
Wilson Kipsang has won marathons all over the world, including 3 of the major ones, Berlin, London, and New York. He won a bronze medal in the marathon at the 2012 London Olympics, and he's hoping to be selected for Kenya's team for the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm VOA's Sonny Young, and that's the sunny side of sports. Vincent?
Sonny, thank you. I hope they keep it clean, But be sure to watch the Sunny Side of Sports every Monday and Friday, right here on Africa 54. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings, Today Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.
France is in its third day of mourning following Friday's terrorist attacks that killed 129 people. We'll have a special report on poaching and the growing use of a deadly chemical to kill the animals. And could Kenya's doping scandal dash Olympic dreams? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori.
Good evening. I'm Cynthia Areh from Channels TV, and this is Africa 54. Now, French authorities have detained 23 people in police raids across the country in the aftermath of Friday's terrorist attacks in Paris. Officials are also investigating reports that the mastermind is a Belgian national living in Syria.
Well, meanwhile, masked Belgian police are searching a Brussels neighborhood for suspects believed to be involved in the massacre. We get more in this report from Reuters' Gavino Gary.
The hunt for suspects in Friday's attacks in Paris has focused not only on targets in France, but Belgium as well. Police in Brussels have converged on the Molenbeek district where two of the attackers had lived. Several arrests have been made, although 5 of 7 suspects taken into custody over the weekend have been released. Attention is also turning to the man who may have masterminded the attacks. A source close to the French investigation has told Reuters that Abdelhamid Abaoud, a Belgian currently in Syria, could be behind the carnage in Paris. A man with the same name was featured in Islamic State's so-called online magazine called Dabiq last February. Authorities in Paris say one